Born into a proud military family, Army Chief Warrant Officer Phillip Brashear is the third son of late Navy Master Chief Carl Brashear, the first African-American U.S. Navy diver, whose courageous life story was detailed in the 2000 motion picture Men of Honor. Inspired by his father's legacy, Brashear proudly served his country for more than 40 years. A graduate of IC Norcom High School, Brashear was awarded an athletic scholarship to Old Dominion University, where he competed on the school's wrestling team for a year before making the decision to forge his own path in the military. Brashear enlisted in the U.S. Navy Reserve in 1981, where he served as a jet engine mechanic and helicopter crewman at the Naval Air Station in Norfolk, Virginia. While Brashear enjoyed being part of the air crew, it had always been his dream to become a pilot, but without a college degree, he was not eligible for Navy pilot training. However, much like his father before him, Phillip was determined to accomplish his goal. In 1989, he made a blue to green shift. After being accepted to the Army's Warrant Officer program and completing initial rotary wing training in 1991, he became a Warrant Officer pilot in the Virginia Army National Guard. Serving with the Army National Guard for almost 2 decades, Brashear retired in November 2007 after a strenuous deployment to Iraq and his father's passing. Less than 2 years later, Brashear decided he still had more to give his country. Inspired by his late father's famous words, "It's not a sin to get knocked down, it's a sin to stay down." He returned to the military, joining the Army Reserve in 2009 and serving as a rear detachment commander for Bravo and Delta companies of the 5 159th General Support Aviation Battalion located at Fort Eustis, Virginia. A master aviator with more than 2,600 flight hours, Chief Brashear spent most of his military career flying helicopters, including the Vietnam helicopter UH-1 Huey, 2 different models of the UH-60 Black Hawk as a maintenance test pilot, and 2 different models of the CH-47 Chinook. He has flown humanitarian missions to Bolivia, deployed to Bosnia as part of Task Force Eagle, and to Iraq as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Today, Brashear is a Command Chief Warrant Officer with the 80th Training Command. A top technical expert for his command, he invests much of his time serving as an advisor to his commanding general and as a mentor to fellow warrant officers and soldiers. Outside of the military, Brashear works as a Department of Defense civilian at the Defense Logistics Agency in Richmond, Virginia, and serves as the president of the Carl Brashear Foundation, a nonprofit organization not only dedicated to inspiring future generations through sharing the incredible life story of Carl Brashear, but also working with veterans hospitals across the country to rehabilitate the lives of wounded service members. Together with his wife Sandra, Brashear has 3 daughters, Tia, Megan, and Melanie, and a son, Tyler, who is carrying on the family's proud military heritage as an Army ROTC cadet at North Carolina A&T University.
Sharecropper family in Kentucky with not much education at all. The third thing, that he was very poor. He came from a poor background. So the 3 things that were already against him were his race, his economic position in life, and his education. But he overcame those things and joined the military and strived his hardest to become a Navy diver. He finally got into Navy dive school and graduated in 1954, which in itself is an accomplishment, to finally get into a school where he was held back because of the segregation of races in the military. But to finally graduate in 1954 was an achievement that was just unheard of. So he became a diver in the Navy in 1954 and started his diving career, moving up the ranks, progressing, earning the respect of his fellow divers, because my father was capable of accomplishing the same goals that the other divers, the other ethnic groups, the white guys and everything else were able to do, my father was able to do. So he was starting to gain respect, which was definitely a feather in his cap. Well, as the years rolled along, he was gaining respect and moved up the ranks. But in 1966, there were 2 Air Force planes that collided off the coast of Spain. One of those planes had nuclear weapons on board, and 2 dropped on land, 1 dropped in the water. The Navy tasked Navy divers to the coast of Spain to finally get that bomb off the ocean floor because nobody knew where it was. So they had to send divers to rummage around the bottom of the ocean floor off the coast of Spain to look for it. Well, my dad's dive team did find the third nuclear bomb that was on the ocean floor. But during that whole operation was when my dad suffered his fourth incident that kind of helped pamper him. During the course of that whole operation, there was a shipboard operation where they were trying to lift the bomb off the ocean floor. Some cables got snapped and an accident occurred to where a cable came across the deck and pretty much tore the bottom part of my dad's left leg off. He was pronounced dead 3 times on the operation because he had lost so much blood before they could finally stabilize him and get him shipped from that shipboard operation off the coast of Spain to Germany. From Germany, they then air transported him back to the United States at the Portsmouth Naval Hospital, where in July of 1966, he finally had his amputation operation to remove the bottom part of his leg. So think about it, racism, poverty, illiteracy, and now the fourth hurdle that my father had to overcome was the loss of the bottom part of his left leg, which the Navy decided, okay, you're handicapped, we don't need you anymore. But that didn't fit with my father because he knew that with a prosthetic leg, he can continue his diving career and make it as a diver in the United States Navy. After a year of progressive rehabilitation, my father finally proved to the Navy that yes, as an amputee, he could come back to diving status in the Navy and complete his career, which again was unheard of. He was the first person to ever do that. So let's go back. My father, and we talk about resiliency, the 5 hurdles that he overcame, the 4 we'll recap right now: racism, poverty, illiteracy, now physical disability. So my father was able to overcome that and make quite a name for himself in the Navy. Well, he wasn't over yet. As my father progressed through the years, even after the loss of the leg, became a master diver in 1970. The highest elevation that a diver in the Navy can hold, the highest rank, the highest privilege, the highest honor that a Navy diver can hold is to be a master diver in the Navy. Unheard of again, especially for somebody who was considered disabled because of the loss of his leg back in the 60s. But he achieved that goal. What resiliency. Now, before my father finally retired in 1979, he probably went through his hardest and most difficult challenge, which was to admit to the Navy that he had a drinking problem and to submit himself to the Navy substance abuse course. So before my father retired in 1979, he submitted himself to the Navy alcohol abuse course and passed that course to get over his alcoholism. Now, my father wasn't perfect, and I'm not trying to say that he was, but for him to admit to the Navy that he had a problem and to confront that problem, subject himself to the Navy to get this problem squared away, so that in 1979, April 1st, he retired with full honors, was something that was, again, unheard of. To admit you got a problem really is probably the hardest thing to do, probably harder than what he had to come back from after the loss of his leg. To admit that you have a problem, to subject yourself to somebody else's rule and subjugation, and to say, okay, I'm going to defeat this. Well, my father did it, and in 1979, retired from the Navy, full honors with nothing on his record that would contribute to the alcoholism that he did suffer through. So at that time, the Navy was so amazed at my dad's efforts that they wanted to make a movie about him. But at that time in 1979, there weren't really many people that were going to fund or develop a movie about Carl Brashear. As the years went on and my dad's fame grew, the story finally got to then Dr. Bill Cosby, who said, Carl Brashear, we're going to make a movie about your life because you have been so resilient. You have accomplished so much that I want to tell the story. So in 1995, Dr. Bill Cosby met my dad, and the preliminary events took place to get the movie in place so that in 2000, the movie Men of Honor with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Robert DeNiro was finally on the major Hollywood screens. But it was then Dr. Bill Cosby who initiated that process to where the movie came out later. In the movie Men of Honor, many of you probably already seen, depicts the story about my father and the 5 hurdles we went through. Again, 5 things that affect not only our country, but every country in the world. And I don't know why in today's society, especially in America, we're still dealing with racism, poverty, illiteracy, physical disability, and just to make it one subject, drug and alcohol abuse. 5 things that still affect every country in the world today and are still affecting us today that we have to deal with. But my father overcame those things. And by overcoming those things, what he did, he took the ability of any of us to complain away. If he could go through those 5 things and make it in this world and to be one of the most famous sailors anywhere in the world, by doing that and by accomplishing those goals, we have no right to ever complain about anything. Because when my dad died July 25th, 2006, he died with a smile on his face and grace in his heart because he had no malice against anybody. So whenever we come across a hard day, we don't have the right to complain or ever cross anybody. Because if my father goes through those 5 things, what choice or what right gives us the right to ever complain about anything? My dad's motto was, it's not a sin to get knocked down, it's a sin to stay down, which literally means when life dictates something to you, you don't let that affect your life. When life hands you lemons, you go make lemonade. So my father was definitely a person of resiliency who said, never let anything in life dictate the rest of your life. Because we all go through changes, we all go through ups and downs, but we overcome those things by being resilient. And that's the topic of today's talk, is being resilient. And my father, like I said, is the definition of resiliency. Through his life lessons and by being his son with that close association, I picked up on a lot of that resiliency, never to look at anything as something that's going to defeat me. I never look at an obstacle and look at it and says, oh man, I can't do that. Because in our household, you can never say the word I can't. You had to either try. My father didn't mind if you failed, but as long as you gave it 100%, that was my dad's focus. Try anything, give it 100%. And if you fail, we'll try to find some other way for you to accomplish your goal. But never teach your kids to say the word I can't, because once they say I can't, they've already failed because they didn't give it the effort to even try to accomplish their goals. So through my dad's life, I've learned that to be resilient, you have to have a positive attitude and never give up on anything, because there's not a challenge out there that you can't come over or that you can't get over and accomplish or get around or whatever you need to do to make it right for yourself. So when we talk about resiliency, think of people like Carl Brashear, who wasn't a perfect person. The reason I brought up his alcoholism, because he wasn't perfect. There's only one perfect person that's ever walked this earth. And I don't try to make my dad into something so great, because we've had great men and women in this country. But I do try to stress the fact that if you look at what he went through and you look at where he ended up, that's nothing but a life of resiliency. Again, race, poverty, illiteracy, physical disability, drug and alcohol abuse. By him going through those 5 things, anybody in this world can make it. We've had great men and women in this country. George Washington, white aristocrat, well-educated. Martin Luther King came from a middle-aged family, but he was well-educated. Name me one person like my father who went through the 5 things that he went through and still made it. There's hundreds of examples out there, and that's to stress my point that anybody can make it if you have faith in yourself and you are resilient, which is the topic of today's talk, is resiliency. So through my dad's example, I want to share that with you. Stay resilient, stay upbeat, stay motivated, and there's nothing in this world that you can't accomplish. With that, I'd like to say God bless you. It's a blessing to be here with all of you today, and I'm up for any questions now if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phillip. What a great story. What a great way to share lessons learned, as well as to really exemplify the definition of resiliency, right? Your dad, for sure, had a lot of obstacles. He had a lot of challenges, but the one thing he didn't do was give up. And he persevered through it all, knowing that all he had to do was ask for help, right? And so, you know, a lot of us, we tend to not want to ask for the help. Pride gets in the way. But your dad was able to show that sometimes we do need a helping hand. And he knew where to go, who to go to, and to get the help that he needed. And we're so blessed to be able to have his legacy be shared with this group today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we're going to go ahead and transition into a conversation with you, Phillip. Are you open for that?
I'm okay with that. Yes.
All right. So folks on the line, if you happen to have any questions while we're going through this dialogue, please don't hesitate to put it in the chat. we have our teams ready to take those questions. And once we get through this conversation, we'll open up the lines for some Q&A with Phillip directly. So Phillip, just to kind of warm us up a little bit, my first question for you is, when you feel safe to travel again, what is the next place on your bucket list that you would like to travel to, and why?
Well, I would tell you, having the COVID shots pretty early through this epidemic, through the military, I've started my travel already, and I've always wanted to go to San Antonio, Texas. And just 2 weeks ago, the military sent me there. And I'll tell you what, the Riverwalk is fantastic. I would suggest anybody go to San Antonio, Texas, and just stay for a couple of days and just absorb everything that they have to offer. It was great.
Nice. I got to write that down because Texas is on my list too.
Yes.
Well, one of the things we'd love for you to be able to do is to tell us about the Carl Brashear Foundation and its purpose, just to orient folks to the work that you're doing on behalf of your father's legacy.
Okay. Well, when my father passed away, people were giving me money and I didn't know what to do with it. But I had a cousin named Ron from Atlanta, Georgia, said, Phillip, start a foundation and give that money away in your dad's name. So I did the paperwork. It went straight to the IRS with no problems. I'm a nonprofit 501c3 foundation. And what I do with the money that comes in, I send it in increments of $500 to $1,000 to the different VA hospitals throughout the country. So there's no overhead. The money goes straight to the different hospitals around the country, because my dad was a Veterans Administration hospital patient. So that's my way of giving back in his honor, is having his name on those checks as I send it to those hospitals.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Very good. No, that's really impactful, man. I mean, being able to take something that people were just giving you and then turning it around into something bigger. I mean, I honestly can't think of a better way of taking such a fortunate thing to you and then being able to reflect that out. Kind of going into the next part of it, you know, when you were in the Army, you know, as far as being the son of Carl Brashear, it's kind of a big name to be around. So was there any adversity that you kind of encountered just having that association from day one?
Well, actually, being the fact that I'm a helicopter pilot, a totally different career field for my dad. In fact, I used to joke with my dad. I said, Dad, I scored higher in the ASVAB test. I go up, not down. He used to always say, son, get out of my face. I don't want to hear that crap. But no, actually, no adversity at all, because 2 different career fields. My father went down in the water and I go up in the sky. So that part never affected me. But since the movie came out, I do get compared a lot because my father was such a great icon, and I'm nowhere near that. But I'm just glad to be in that shadow, even at 58 years old. It's a great shadow to be in, to have such a great father who is an American hero.
You are an icon in your own right, Phillip. Yeah. So never think that you are not. With all of the work that you're doing, you are an icon, and we certainly appreciate you and thank you for your service. So what is the one lesson that your father has taught you that has helped shape you into the person that you are today?
I will tell you this, with all the accolades and all the celebrity status that my father had, he would go out and shake the man picking up the garbage on the curb in front of his house with a warm handshake and a smile, the same way I saw him greet the president, with a warm handshake and a smile. So to him, status of life didn't matter. And if you treat everybody with that kind of respect, you're going to get nothing but that kind of respect back. So that's one thing I loved about my dad that I learned from him, is treat everybody the same, no matter who they are or where they come from.
And it's a good message to have. I mean, as far as being truly fair and showing that form of equity amongst, it doesn't matter where you're from. And I think, you know, as far as what the Carl Brashear Foundation stands for, I mean, I see parts of that. I mean, you know, in terms, not parts, but the whole thing in terms of veteran, disabled, learning disability. You know, there's so many important components of that I think that lean into what you represent. And, you know, there's other aspects of the Carl Brashear Foundation. So what would you say are kind of the most important things, and why we should, you know, what other things we can learn about the Carl Brashear Foundation? What would you think is something to focus on, or is it just a multitude of different things?
Well, I stressed the 5 hurdles that my dad went through, and I stressed the fact that those are still 5 things that the world are dealing with. And those are 5 things that need all of our immediate attention, because this is 2021, and a lot of those things should have been erased in our history long ago, but we're still dealing with it. So I think through the foundation, people can learn that at some point, those 5 things that my father became should be 5 things in our distant past, and then that'll get us ready for new challenges, because at some point, Elon Musk is going to have us on Mars or something like that. So race, poverty, literacy, physical disability, drug and substance abuse, those should be things that should be in our past that we shouldn't have to worry about anymore. There's other challenges ahead of us that we need to direct our focus on.
Yeah, wow, that's powerful. And you talk about challenges, and you shared just some of the things that your father had gone through, specifically around his disability. And one of the questions we'd love for you to be able to share is your thoughts on self-identifying, one, as a veteran, but then why it's important to communicate an individual disability to an employer.
Well, just like we talked about my dad's alcoholism, and I talk about my time in Iraq. You know, I've seen a lot of things, and there's a lot of things that really can affect you. Of course, I have my faith in God, so the things that I was exposed to, I'm able to just kind of compartmentalize. It's changed me, but at least I'm able to deal and live a fulfilled life, even though I've seen a lot of atrocities. And I think with that being said, the people that you work with, and of course, people that you socialize with, need to know the things that you've been through, because there's sometimes now I can't sit in front of a tearjerker movie and keep a straight face, because in the back of my mind, something will start welling up. And I think as employers, you need to know what your employees have been exposed to, so not to put them in a situation where they may be uncomfortable. I think it's important. And like you said, communication is key.
Yeah, it takes that level of communication and that involvement from your employer, whether that's in the military or whether that's in the company. It's you know, understanding how you can talk about the difficult thing and getting the training to say it's okay to talk about that. So I completely identify with that. And you know, it's stuff that I've seen in my personal background, as well as with friends that I've known that have gone through similar, you know, forms of adversity. And, you know, when you're signing up for an organization, it's like, okay, you know, I'm motivated to do it because these things motivate me to be a part of it. And, you know, sometimes the other part of it gets, you know, left behind. So it's important to really put that front and center. So thank you for saying so. And you know, more, you know,
to add to that, John, if I can,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
It helps that the employer is aware as well, so that the employer can share some of the benefits and the resources that may be available to the individual that they may not have realized. You know, there's so much that's out there that we offer to our employees, I'm sure, at all of our organizations. And so, but without knowing, we can't provide those resources. We can't point the individuals in the right place. So it's something just to consider, you know, from that communication standpoint of, you know, opening up just a little bit more so that the help can be provided.
Agreed. Absolutely. And, you know, kind of a weird basic question here, but I kind of want to know, like, Phillip, why'd you sign up for service, man? What was I mean, obviously your family has that, but is there something else that we should know?
As a little kid, I would go to the Navy bases with my father, and I would see how people would hold him in such awe and respect. And I saw how everybody worked together, and being the fact that I was a military brat, there were always different races, but I saw how people worked together and how they mingled. And with that, it really did touch me as a young child that, hey, this is the kind of life I like to live, where everybody has a mission. No matter where you come from, everybody comes together to complete that mission, and nobody was held in any kind of segregated groups. And it influenced me to want to join the military. Although I will share again, my goal was always in the sky. I loved aviation. There was no part of me that ever said put an aquarium on my head and go down in the water.
Yeah, well, I actually want to add one more comment, if I may, Lakysha. Okay, between the sky and the water, where humans neither belong in either one of those, how is it the sky is less scary than the ocean? I mean, I understand for me personally why, but what kind of gave you the bravery and the fascination to do that, just to kind of add on top of that?
You know, like I said, I'm 58 years old. So when I was growing up, the Apollo missions were very pronounced in the news. So the astronauts that were out there doing their thing in space and you know, coming from the jet pilot backgrounds that they had, it was just always made a big influence on me. So that's where I think I really got my love for aviation.
Cool.
But if you think about it, those astronauts are just like my father. You have to strap your environment on your back and go where you need to go. Either it's in the water or in space. So, but aviation is what really got me going. So that was my pull, aviation.
Cool. Very cool.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about leadership. So how has your leadership approach changed as you've progressed in your career?
To be honest with you, I think from when I started in the military to this point now, I developed more social skills. You know, the job is the job, and that's fine. The job is kind of self-pronounced. Everybody knows what the job is, but there's such a personal aspect when it comes to interaction with people. And through the years, I've really tried to stress more of that personal interaction. You know, in today's society, everybody texts and Instagram and Facebook, and I really don't like all that because it takes the personality away. I love the interpersonal reactions between people, not through texting or telephone calls, people to people, face to face. And as I've grown more in my leadership development in the military, I love to do more of that face-to-face interaction, which I think is the most important way to communicate, face-to-face, not through electronic means. I think that takes away the true focus of being a human being.
I agree. I think that, you know, there's something that, you know, in the tech world, we like to call keyboard courage. And, you know, the thing that I advise people on from my side when it comes to the social etiquette around digital communication, it's like, would you say the same thing to someone if they were sitting right in front of you?
Exactly.
And having the acumen to do that, and having the wherewithal to just, you know, treat people as human beings, no matter how you meet them, is really important. But it's really hard to do that when someone is still at a distance. So kind of keeping on the same theme, you know, advice for future leaders, you know, and there was a question in the chat that I saw kind of briefly pop up, you know, and this, you know, during these times, you know, what advice do you have for leaders, you know, given the current environment that we're in and how it's evolving as we grow together as a society?
Well, I take this platform example. I stress the fact that we need to get away from all the, like you said, the keyboard courage and that. But I tell you what, we've got the capability now through the internet to be face-to-face where you can see and interact with people. I think this is the most important thing for leaders to do now, since we have this technology, is more face-to-face through mediums like what we're doing right now. This is so important. When you can see the reaction on the person's face, you can see their expression. If you said something that might be an error, you can see the reaction and you can correct it right there on the spot. So I think this opportunity to do exactly what we're doing is one of the most important things that we can utilize in the future. And I think leaders need to use that.
Thank you.
Sure. And as Gail mentioned in the chat, nothing replaces face-to-face interaction.
Yeah,
that's right.
We all need that human connection. So what does A Son Never Forgets mean to you?
Well, in the movie, they had that written on the side of that radio. And to be honest with you, that's something that Hollywood came up with. But it really does literally mean to me, as I delve into it, my grandfather taught my dad to be resilient, to never give up, go in there and fight for what you want. You know, don't back down from struggles or obstacles. So that saying, even though it was made by Hollywood and put in that movie as something passed from my grandfather to my father, it means a lot to me because the examples that my father set have been passed on to me. And to say a son never forgets is you've learned from somebody or your elder, inherit those things, make them your own, develop them in your life, and be an example of that. Because I'll tell you something, if I ever got into trouble, if I ever did something wrong, it wouldn't be Phillip Brashear, it would be son of. So in essence, I'm representing my dad in my life. Even though I'm 58 years old, I'm still my dad's son. So I have to respect my father's lineage and legacy to keep myself in line. So A Son Never Forgets is just an easy way of saying that. Remember your legacy, remember your heritage. Your parents gave you that name. It's up to you to show respect to your parents by living a life that shows respect to them.
Yeah.
Mike, right.
No, that is a mic drop moment. I mean, you kind of said it better than I think I've ever heard it, in terms of representing legacy. I mean, we are the start and the continuance of what our families have come before us, whether that is a legacy of challenge when it was difficult times, when you didn't have quite the best upbringing, but you still represent a legacy that's able to grow from that adversity, or continue on that mission and that goal. And in your way, in your father's way, you've certainly succeeded in doing that. So
thank you.
Absolutely wonderful. I mean, you weren't going to get away with a question from me from the Men of Honor movie, I hope you realize. So I do want to know personally what your favorite part of the movie was in Men of Honor, man. Just like your personal, like, man, they nailed that, or you know what, that wasn't completely accurate, but I still liked it anyway. So kind of, what was your best part?
The best part of that movie to me was when he came up after putting that pipe assembly together underwater, and Robert DeNiro looks at him, and my father had just come out of that cold water and was shivering. But when they locked eyes, my father rose his chin up in defiance to say, look, no matter what you do to me, I'm still coming back strong.
Yes.
Boy, that was awesome.
Yes.
Cool.
It was almost like a now what moment. Now what?
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. So what is a lesson you could share with us that you learned early on about perseverance and remaining positive throughout all of life's obstacles? Because sometimes we get in our feelings, and sometimes we have these woe is me moments, and sometimes we do have moments where we're celebrating some of the things that we've been able to get through. But for you, what is a lesson that you can share with us around getting through life's obstacles and remaining positive?
Well, let me just share with you quickly. A few years ago, I had a diagnosis from a doctor after my flight physical that I had atrial fibrillation. I had what they call holiday heart or an irregular heartbeat. I don't know where it came from, but at that point, I was told my flight career was over. Well, you know what? To me, that didn't stand well. Just like after my father lost his leg, my dad said, "Oh, that's not going to stand. I'm not going to let that defeat me." So through my dad's example, I got the cardioversion, got my heartbeat back, put in rhythm with the medical procedure. And when I went to Fort Rucker to get my flight status back, they looked at me and said, well, you passed all of our stress tests. The heartbeat's regular again. There's nothing we can do to stop you. You're back on flight status. So I felt like, wow, just like my dad had went through his trials with the military after the loss of his leg, I did the same thing. So through my dad's example, I was able to go through that, even though it was a span of a year. I never got depressed. I never let it get me down. I knew what God had for me was for me. And after that year was over and the Fort Rucker Medical Board said, we're going to put you back on flight status, I knew right then and there, I just relived my whole dad's life again. Because his example led to my example of overcoming obstacles. I was able to overcome. So all I got to say is what God has for you is for you. And there's nothing anybody can do to stop it.
Wow, full circle moment and deja vu, huh?
Yes.
Unbelievable. And as far as your father's legacy goes, just kind of jumping right into it, what part of his legacy are you hoping to pass to the future? But more than that, what part of your legacy as well, you personally, are you hoping to keep continuing on for future generations that's unique to Phillip?
Wow, I don't have anything that's unique to me. Let me tell you something. I just live a life of resiliency as taught to me by my father through his legacy. So that just has to continue on. We have to be resilient. As people, we just can't let bad things in life dictate how our life is going to be for the rest of our lives. So there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, resiliency is ongoing. All through the Bible, you have people who show resiliency and overcame with God's grace to overcome any obstacle that's been put before them. So again, there's nothing new. My father's legacy showed me how to be resilient, and hopefully through my legacy to my son and the rest of my children, just a life of resiliency and never giving up. Because life isn't going to be easy. It's never going to be easy, but you have to be strong and be resilient and be faithful to overcome life, because life isn't easy. As I get older, there's a lot of parts of me that are starting to ache now, but you know what? Until I leave this earth, I'm not going to let those aches and pains stop me. I'm going to keep on until I can't keep on anymore. And then it's a great comfort to me to know but I'll finally go home and be at peace. So just be resilient.
I dig it. I absolutely dig it. That and do more yoga, I guess. You know, that's the only other. Joking.
All right. So, Phillip, we want to thank you for sharing your father's story, but also having this conversation with us. We got to learn a little bit more about you as well as your dad's story, and we certainly appreciate that. And so we now have some time where we're going to open it up for some Q&A from the audience. And so, Melanie, do we have some questions from the audience?
We absolutely do. Everybody's curious, Phillip. So first question, being married to a disabled vet, can you describe how the family overcame the events as young children? So, you know, like maybe the steps that your mother had while your dad was away, you know, how did the family deal?
Wow. Well, let me be brutally honest. My parents divorced right after my father retired from the Navy because of the drinking and the stress and the fact that through my dad's career, I guess the Navy was the most important thing to him. Even though we knew who my father was, we grew up with him, there was still that separation of him always having to go off with the Navy. So I won't say that my childhood was without any obstacles because my parents divorced my senior year in high school. So I had to deal with that, and so did my other brothers have to deal with that. So there was nothing perfect about that. But again, at an early age, I learned how to be resilient. My parents weren't together anymore, and that's just the way it was going to be. But yeah, I just want to let you know it wasn't a perfect picture growing up. My father was always gone with the military from time to time, and when he did come home, the drinking did take effect in our household to the point where it affected me. I don't even drink. That's not even within me because of what I saw it do to my father and my mother. So just want to let you know that that was out there too.
All right, yeah, thank you for that honesty there. So next question, did your dad have a role model in his military career?
He did. He loved boxing, and Muhammad Ali was one of his most famous role models. He loved the fact that Muhammad Ali was so confident in himself, and when it came time to rise to the occasion, Muhammad Ali rose to the occasion. My father really did admire Muhammad Ali a lot, and since they both were from Kentucky, they got to know each other as their celebrity kind of came up at the same time.
Oh, that's cool. That's pretty neat. So another question, you've already answered several questions about the movie, but of course, you know, people want to know. So what was your father's thoughts on how Cuba Gooding Jr. portrayed him in the movie and his overall thoughts on the movie itself?
Well, my father gave it 85%. Now, let me just say something. In the movie, they had Robert DeNiro as the main character. There was actually 3 different people that were exposed to my father during his career. But in Hollywood, you're not going to kick Robert De Niro out of a movie. So they carried Robert De Niro throughout the whole movie, fulfilling those 3 different people. My parents didn't just meet. They actually grew up together in rural Kentucky. And for those of you that are familiar with the military or any kind of medical setting, you don't get a 2-hour courtroom scene to prove that you're medically fit. My father had to go through a year of that rehabilitative training under the exposure to the medical review board that he could maintain diving status. So it wasn't just a 2-hour courtroom scene that was over. He had to go through a year of being viewed and examined before they finally gave him his dive status back.
Wow. Okay, so let's see, a couple more questions. How do you identify your blind spots? And once you found out about them, how did you address them? Steps to contribute to your resiliency, excuse me.
Oh, wow. My blind spots. I'm not picking up on that.
So, so you talk about resiliency, right, throughout. And so I think when they're talking about blind spots, probably just some of your weaknesses, maybe not necessarily blind spots per se, but some of your areas for.
Well, I will share with you, when I was told that I couldn't fly anymore because of that heart condition, I did get depressed. I think it lasted all of a couple hours, and I just decided, you know what, forget that. I'm too good for this. I've got too many examples of people making it. But I guess for a few hours, I did get depressed for a moment. And things do hit you. Whenever life throws you a curve, you reflect. But I tell you what, for me personally, when those blind spots or when those obstacles hit me, I don't spend much time on them. I mean, I'm ready to sit down for a minute and think about it. But the next minute after that, I'm up getting ready to change and tackle those things. So whatever I get hit with, believe me, it doesn't last long because I'm in attack mode after that. So when things do come up, you know, you reflect and just get your game plan together and decide what you're going to do to fix it.
Rapid adaptation. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I think we got maybe time for one more question. So Dory says, I went through basic training in Alabama. Before the basic course started, I was given a list of places I could not go to: restaurants, bars, stores, and even a reservoir. When asked why I couldn't go to these places, I was told they were members only. That was a way for Jim Crow to replace whites only. Thoughts on that, or did you have experiences like that?
When I was down in Fort Rucker, Alabama, I experienced some of that also. Like I said, I can't believe in the 20th and 21st century that we're still experiencing and going through those things. But I think through communication and by God with education, if we can just get people educated, I think with more education, people grow and learn that the ways of the past are not the ways of the future. I think if people just allow themselves to be educated, we can finally overcome this problem with race in our country and hopefully throughout the world. But it just takes education, and I tell you, it takes a lot of love and patience. You know, you come across those people, you have to be patient with them. At some point in their lives, they'll realize that their ideas are wrong, and they'll finally get over it. But until they become educated and until they feel some love in their own heart to get over those types of issues that they have, it's just going to take time.
No, that's
Okay.
great. It's also re-education too. So constant updating.
And at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And
That's right.
so we all have to come from a place of love and understanding and wanting to know more in order for us to see those shifts and changes that we're desiring to see.
That's right.
All right. We have one more time for one more question, Lakysha, do you think?
We do.
All right, we'll do one more, and then we'll go ahead and turn it over to Derek for a closing statement. I think you touched on this one a little bit, but with the division in our country right now, what advice can you give to those on the call to bring our country back together and unite? And I think you touched on this a little bit already.
Yeah, I tell you what, I sit back and I look at the news. It's to the point sometimes you just want to turn the talking heads off. You know, everybody, to include the news media, everybody loves hype. And this hype of what we're going through now, to be honest with you, we just need to maybe not listen as much or not let other people dictate on how we should feel. You know, a lot of people get on those news platforms and they say things for the ratings and to be popular. But I think in real life, most people aren't like that. And if most people spoke up and said, hey, stop with that noise, we're tired of the noise, we want to hear the real truth. I think if we can get enough people in this world, especially in this country, to say those types of things, then maybe some of that stuff that people say just to be antagonistic will go away. Because we don't need people trying to antagonize the major society to the point where everybody's upset. We just need more of us to just say, hey, stop with all this noise and let's all just get along. And like I said, with education and love, we can get over it. It's just too many people now get too much exposure saying the wrong things, and we need to minimize those folks.
So true, so true. Okay, well, with that, I think that's our last question. So thank you so much, Phillip. We're going to turn it over to Derek for the closing remarks.
Thanks so much.
Melanie. Appreciate it.
All right. Let me give you the spotlight, Derek.
Appreciate it. Thank you for our special guest today. Thank you. What an impactful story about your father, his resilience, overcoming obstacles, and prevailing in spite of circumstances. Thank you for the discussion as well, everyone on the panel. Definitely was transparent and eye-opening. Definitely was a great experience. So I'm glad I was able to actually be in the moment. Thank you to all who have taken the time to attend this event on today. Thank you to our NAMIC-Virginia and NAMIC-Denver teams for your continued support. Thank you to our sponsors for helping to make this event possible. NAMIC-Virginia and NAMIC-Denver are planning some amazing events for Pride Month next month, along with some other local chapters in the month of June. So if you'd like to follow us, please look at the social media for more information. And to join us for future events like this, you can follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you everyone for attending this event today, and you all have a wonderful day.